Hello, this is Bill Worrell with Virginia Cooperative Extension. Today's episode of 15 Minutes in the Forest, we're going to look at some of the other products we can get from the woods. We're going to go into the forest, going to tap some trees, we'll collect some sap, and then we'll see if we can make some tasty maple syrup.
Hello, my name is Chris Allgaier. I'm with the High Knob chapter of Virginia Master Naturalists, and we've been involved with a project of making tree syrup. We started in 2016 tapping maple trees and learning how to make maple syrup here in Wise County. A couple years ago we continued with maple syrup, but we also started making syrup from black walnut trees. Today we're in Pound, Virginia, and we're going to be tapping some sycamore trees because we hear that you can make some pretty good syrup from the sap of sycamores.
So we've got a tap on this big sycamore. The tubing goes down to the next big sycamore just down the hill from us. There's a tap on that one. Then it goes into the main line, goes around a smaller tree, then way down the hill there to another sycamore. And it's tapped into a few more sycamore trees down there before it goes into a collection tank or a collection bucket. Here we have three teenagers tapping a walnut tree in the yard around the family home. Since the tree is big, they can put 2 taps in it. With a few taps, you can collect enough sap to make syrup for your family. Walnut sap has lower sugar content than maple, so when you boil it down, you will get less syrup as compared to maple. Here we see the High Knob Master Naturalist group tapping some walnut trees. This shows putting the tap into the tree. And here we see attaching the bucket to the tree and putting the tubing into the collection bucket. Now we see some of the challenges in collecting sap. As this collection jug filled, it got heavier and dropped enough that the collection line came out of the jug. The sap flowed, and then with overnight low temperatures, the sap froze in the line and the jug. Kelly Gilmer in Lebanon, Virginia, had 9 taps in sugar maple trees this year. He says the weather was perfect at his location, with only one day where temperatures stayed below freezing. He collected sap over 20 days and had good sap flow on 19 days. He uses two burner camp stoves to cook off the sap in stainless steel pans. He evaporates about 9 gallons per hour. When he boils down to about 4 gallons, he finishes processing the syrup in a stock pot that takes about 2 hours to boil down to the finished product. This year, Kelly collected 198 gallons of sap, which cooked down to 4.3 gallons of maple syrup.
Hello, I'm Keith Bevins here in Wise, Virginia, and just started probably 3 weeks ago trying to tap some maple trees. We've got some sugar maples up on the farm, and just try to make some syrup with that. So we tapped about 25 taps on some trees, and got a couple good flows so far. Today's, I guess, the 1st of February, so we're a little early in doing that, but we just ran some taps with buckets, 5-gallon buckets with the hoses going into them, and so I check those as the weather permits, and try to boil off maybe once a week so far. And so in doing that, we had to make us a little homemade evaporator, so we made one out of a barrel stove, and got us a couple stainless pans on there, and with what we got there, we can do about 4 gallons to the hour.
Brian Hubbard's work in maple syrup started 6 years ago when his son tapped 10 maple trees for a high school project. Later, when his son went to college, Brian increased the number of taps to about 150. Every year, adding more taps to the operation. One year he had so much sap flow he could not cook it fast enough to process all the sap into syrup. So he added a reverse osmosis system which takes some water out of the sap and leaves a higher sugar concentration and a smaller amount of sap to cook into syrup. Today he has about 700 taps and sugar and red maple trees on his farm. He usually gets 1 gallon of syrup from every 60 to 70 gallons of sap. As he continued to grow the operation and add more taps, he decided he needed to build a sugar house to have an indoor facility to process the sap into syrup. Brian also built the continuous flow evaporator that he currently uses in processing his syrup. The maple taps are connected to a collection line and the sap flows into a big container. The sap comes into the sugar house and goes into the reverse osmosis system, which takes some water out of the sap and leaves a higher sugar concentration in a smaller volume of sap. It basically takes about 3/4 of the water out of the sap. The water is pumped outside into a water tank, and the sap is pumped into a tank near the evaporator. Sap flow from the tank into the continuous flow evaporator is controlled by a float valve. A hood and exhaust fan was installed to pull moisture out of the building. After a few hours of cooking, we reach the temperature where we get maple syrup. Syrup from the evaporator gets poured through a filter as it goes into the smaller system for final processing. Okay, I'm going to take you to look at another collection system here they've put up where they've tapped some trees. Here we're at the upper end of this collection line. They've got the main line tied off to a tree, and then they've started, the line is going up down to the woods to some trees that are tapped. So we'll take a closer look at the taps as we go down the hill. Okay, the first tree tapped on this line is a red maple. We see where the tap is in the tree, and then the line is connected into the main collection line. And we'll go down to the next maple. We've got another red maple here, tapped in this collection system. Here we've got a bigger red maple with a tap, and then it's connected into the connection line. That's the main collecting line from all of the taps. And if we hold this still, hopefully you can see that the sap is flowing. A little bit of sap flowing down the collection tube. It goes around this tree over to another tree that's tapped. Going on down the hill. Here's another tree tapped in this collection system, a sugar maple. And you see we've got some more. We still have some flow going down the main line. And we'll go on down the hill to the next tree. So it was really cold here this morning, but it got up into the 40s this afternoon. So that allows the sap to start flowing, and we see some sap flow into the collection barrel. I want to thank you for joining me today as we learned the process of making maple syrup. Tune in again next Friday for another edition of 15 Minutes in the Forest.